What are you
Yeah,
buying?
loved it. Yeah, I bought in my retirement portfolio and King of the Jungle, Uber, the transformation giant, like the transportation giant. I've had this on
Oh,
my radar for quite some time, and I hadn't really looked at it properly as an investment. And actually, you know what blew my pants off? Like we all think we know Uber. I didn't realize actually in the UK, like you guys have like DoorDash and stuff like that in the US. We don't really have that stuff in the UK. Turns out we do. I didn't realize. So in the Uber app now, okay, I always thought about Uber as being like, transportation, get me somewhere. And I knew they did Uber Eats, which is like ordering food from
Hot
restaurants.
dogs.
They've also got like a whole like logistics thing in the app now. I had no idea it was there. I just never like scrolled far enough to the right of options. So you can get like, if I want to send like a set of door keys to you, I can send them in an Uber and it's like cheaper than like a passenger in an Uber. And I can get like my Uber driver to go to like my local supermarket or like wine store or hardware store and like just literally go and pick stuff off the shelves, fill the bag of stuff I've ordered, and then they'll get it to me like, in half an hour. So, and don't get me wrong, you're paying for that. There's a whole bunch of fees that the platform earns, but I didn't realize this even was a thing in London. So, like that kind of perked my ears up when I started doing my research. The thing that actually caught my eye and why I looked at this properly was just a really interesting innovation story. And I think they just did something really smart. Like they've got this hordes of drivers who today are human drivers, like sat in cars, driving people around. But a lot of the time they're just kind of sitting there waiting for like their next ride. And I just caught in the news like a month or two ago, Uber are now having these like side gigs or like non-driving tasks for drivers, which might be like taking a photograph of like a menu and then translating it or doing other um other sort of tasks they can do on their phone where they're training AI or they're doing like translations or they're doing like various things. Um and then the driver can earn like a few bucks in their non-driving time. I think that's really smart, like leveraging. It's like it's good for Uber, it's good for the end user, and it's good for like the driver. They're using their like dead time in some interesting way if they want to do that. It's like optional. So
mm-hmm.
that just made me go, this is like a really innovative company. This is not just um, like, a transport company. And so I started looking at it properly. And then when I really started thinking about it over the weekend, well, last week, um, so let me share not so much my thesis, because I've taken like a starter position in this for this is like a less than a 1% allocation in my retirement portfolio. So this is a bit like, probably a bit less than my first third. Um, And I started to think about this, and I want to kind of run this idea past you, but I've bought the stock anyway. And it's really like the major risk slash opportunity that faces Uber today, because sure, they do logistics and they do restaurant delivery and everything else, but the thing that's really going to change the trajectory of this company is autonomous vehicles. When we take the drivers out and it's just like cars driving themselves around, maybe doing food delivery or maybe moving passengers around. And so the big question for Uber, I think, is like, is this an opportunity or is this a threat? And if we ignore Asia, which is like, more than half the world, but let's just put that aside and we just think about essentially like, Europe, the UK, and North America, and a bunch of other countries, um, there are really only three credible autonomous driving platforms at any scale today, which are Tesla, Waymo, owned by Alphabet, and then, whether you may not realize it, but NVIDIA Drive. So NVIDIA have like their own hardware stack, software stack, and that's essentially like that's the software, the autonomous vehicle solution for pretty much everybody else, like the BMWs and the Mercedes and all the other kind of Western world manufacturers. They're all sticking like NVIDIA Drive in their cars. So, and there's like hundreds of other tiny, tiny ones, but these are the three, like, it's like the three giants, really. And Tesla, Waymo, and NVIDIA, meaning everybody else. So, if we think about how Uber interoperate with those three, it's actually a really interesting, different story for all three. And it could change quite a lot. And depending on how this story plays out, is going to determine like the future of Uber, the company. because they had a go at doing autonomous vehicles themselves. And I think, well, sadly, there was like a fatal accident, I believe, and they've kind of retired that program. They now seem to be very much positioning themselves as like the platform that captures demand, i.e., it's on hundreds of millions of smartphones, probably billions of smartphones. And it's like, if I want a ride as a rider, like I generally go to Uber, maybe Lyft in the US, maybe Bolt or some other apps in the UK or Europe. But like most people, where Uber exists, most people have Uber. And I'm going to ask you your Uber rating in a minute.
Actually, Badge, may I just comment one side bracket? Just during my drunken Austin adventures 2 days ago. I'm a Lyft guy myself here in Austin, but I went to my buddy and I went to get the little scooters. Those little the little scooter things that people leave all around town. And I did not realize, but that was through the Uber app. So, because Waymo cars are now driverless here in Austin, they're everywhere. I also tried to get a driverless car to pick us up through the Uber app, but for whatever reason, I think they're not allowing many people to use them. They're allowing some, so I couldn't hail one of those. But yes, the surprise for me, in maybe a similar way to you, is, Uber is actually the verb, right? You Uber, you don't Lyft a ride, you Uber a ride. And that now means like 50 different kinds of things. So yes, you're on point so far.
Yeah, very good. So let's come back to this sort of key thing and how the market's going to evolve. Like if we just accept that Uber probably aren't going to launch their own platform again, and they're trying to become like the demand aggregator. So the one app that most people have on their phone and go to if they want to go from A to B, rather than most people needing to have like the Tesla app, the Waymo app, and then like the NVIDIA app, or maybe even like, the Mercedes app and the BMW app and everything else. If we accept, and I accept, so that's why I bought the company, that probably the majority of people are going to want to have like one app, maybe no more than two. And if they have two, one of those will almost certainly be Uber. Well, they've already got distribution. So they've got hundreds of millions of miles demand that these three companies are going to want to service, the companies that are actually providing the journeys. And so you've got these three different starting points today. You've got Tesla, who are pretty committed to rolling out Robotaxi and having their own in-house built app, which they've already built and deployed. So they're kind of off doing their own thing. You've got Waymo, who are partnered directly with Uber, and they're using Uber to book Waymos. And I don't think there's a separate Waymo app, maybe unless you're like an Alphabet employee. Most people are booking them through the platform. And as you said, it's only like beta testing still, perhaps. So probably not every possible passengers can use it. And then you've got NVIDIA, and I don't think there's been a definitive announcement, but it looks very much like the NVIDIA Drive platform is going to piggyback with Uber and have that as the kind of portal. So you've got kind of NVIDIA in, Waymo in, Tesla out. Now, here's the question, right? If we believe there's probably just going to be this one app, like, okay, maybe Tesla cars are nicer in general. Like I'm happy if I book an Uber and it's like a Tesla. I'm like, oh, cool, I've got like a Tesla coming, not like some Honda Civic or whatever. Am I going to be sort of happy enough and care enough that I only want a Tesla and I'm only going to have go to the Tesla app to book my car? Because there are going to be fewer cars available, certainly in once the market's established. Not everyone wants to own a Tesla. So therefore, Tesla will be less than half of the total market of driven miles alongside Mercedes and BMW and all the other hundreds of manufacturers using NVIDIA. So I sort of feel like Tesla are probably not going to cut their nose off to spite their face. They're probably going to have their own app, and they're going to come inside the Uber tent as well, because you've got a bunch of essentially free demand there, and there'll be some pricing agreement in the same way, as they've opened up the supercharger network to non-Tesla vehicles. They can maximize the capex, and it means they can scale out supercharge a network faster because they're earning income from like the other non-Tesla manufacturers. So that's like better for the Tesla ecosystem. I think the same logic applies here because, okay, if Tesla put their cars on the Uber network, there'll be that much more demand, so they can then scale out the cars faster, so they'll have more cars on the road. Like, surely that is going to be Musk's logic once they're out of this like pilot phase.
May I comment or? It's you named it actually. When you said surely that must be Elon's logic, right? And the whole time I'm listening to you talk. The first thought I had was, okay, we're in this weird world now. Not weird. We're at the stage now where companies like, say, Google and Apple are in a sense of duopoly, but now they're finding ways that they have to partner in order to go to the next level, right? So in that sense, I think I'm buying what you're selling, which is logically, if we say there's a duopoly here, you're going to have the Tesla world and then the Uber world, and it's a big enough pie for two anyway, right? So that's maybe worth knowing, right?
Sure.
And then I started thinking a little bit about, another analogy, our companies, the Starlink versus ASTS, and that's another way that there's probably a duopoly exists and so forth. But it's when you said, surely Elon's logic is going to be X. And based on what you said, yes, I would say logically, rationally, that would be a pro to go forth with this investment. Because, yeah, that's what it looks like, right? Yeah, it's what it looks like, right? But that Elon Musk factor, where when he goes for something, right, he's based on everything I understand from the SpaceX Starlink case, right? He's willing, he's so, call it maniacal in wanting to, achieve victory sort of at all cost. And he has obviously the capital base and the smarts and all that. I just don't know how well I would sleep at night knowing that my counterparty here is the one guy that might even sabotage things or, go be some weird cost leader loss thing, the way, Bezos sort of slowly defeated all of the opponents by undercutting them over and over across years and years. And it's like, I think I'm trying to say, like, anybody but Musk. If it was anybody but Musk on the other side, I'm like, yes, I get it. I'm in for this duopoly vision. Okay, Badge. I hear you. I think this is an interesting moment. I see in this moment, I see both a tremendous upside, obviously, and I'm sorry, I can't quite get past my own initial worry about the Musk wild card. And so what I'm going to do is take your feedback seriously. I'm going to poke around the investment thesis some more.